Welcome to Classic Books Deep Dive. My name is Michael, and today with us is Joanna.
Hello, everyone.
So, Joanna, we're diving into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, such a classic. Still so relevant even after all these years.
Right. People still rave about it, but is it really more than just another self-help book?
Definitely. It's not about quick fixes. Covey's focus is on building character, a solid foundation.
So like real lasting change from the inside out.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of a tree pruning leaves won't help if the roots are rotten. You need to address the root cause.
I like that. Get to the core of the issue. And speaking of shifting perspectives, he starts with that old woman, young woman, actical illusion.
Oh, that's a good one. A classic. It perfectly illustrates how our paradigms shape what we see. Two people can look at the same thing and see something completely different.
It's wild, right? I remember the first time I saw that, it totally blew my mind. Have you ever had like a similar experience where suddenly seeing something from a different perspective just changes everything?
Oh, absolutely. Countless times. And Covey argues that's the key to real growth, shifting those internal lenses.
So it's not about just changing your behavior, it's about changing how you see the world.
Exactly. He contrasts two approaches, the character ethic and the personality ethic. The character ethic is about building a strong internal foundation. It's about integrity, honesty, fairness, who you are.
And the personality ethic is more about appearances, right? Like those get-rich-quick schemes, all surface, no substance.
Exactly. Covey argues that focusing only on techniques without that character foundation is like building a house on sand.
You need a strong foundation, I get it. So then he goes into the first habit, be proactive. And he tells this powerful story about Viktor Frankl.
Oh, from Man's Search for Meaning. That's a profound story.
Yeah. Finding the freedom to choose his response, even in a concentration camp. Incredible.
It really highlights that even in the most difficult circumstances, we have the power to choose our response. That's true proactivity.
Not just reacting to what life throws at you, but actually choosing how you respond. And then there's this whole idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence.
Oh, that's a good one. The circle of concern is all the stuff we worry about, but can't control. The weather, politics, Proactive people focus on their circle of influence, things they can control, like their actions and attitude.
So, step 1, be proactive, focus your energy on what you can control. But how do you even know what to focus on?
That's where habit 2 comes in, begin with the end in mind. Covey asks us to imagine our own funeral.
Whoa, that got dark quickly.
It's a powerful visualization, though. What would you want people to say about you? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? It forces you to think about what truly matters.
It's about your values, not just achievements, right?
Exactly. And that leads to the idea of creating a personal mission statement, defining your core values and living in alignment with them.
Like a roadmap for your life, basically.
Precisely. Covey talks about creating your life twice, first mentally, then physically.
Makes sense. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, would you?
Exactly. So you need that mental blueprint for your life, too.
Okay, so we're being proactive. We've got a vision. But how do we make it all happen? Life gets so busy.
That's where habit 3 comes in. Put first things first. Covey introduces this time management matrix.
Okay, break that down for me.
It's a way to prioritize tasks based on urgency and importance. There are 4 quadrants. Most people spend their time in quadrant 1, the urgent and important stuff, always putting out fires, stressed out.
Ooh, yeah, that's me. Running around like a chicken with its head cut off.
But the key, Covey says, is to spend more time in quadrant 2. Important, but not urgent.
So things like planning, relationship building, self-improvement stuff that's important for the long term?
Exactly. Those things we know we should be doing but often get pushed aside. And it requires saying no to good things so you can say yes to the best.
That's tough, though.
It is. But when you're clear about your values, it becomes easier to decide what to prioritize.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So we've got the first 3 habits. Be proactive, have a vision, and manage your time effectively. Then Covey shifts gears and starts talking about interdependence.
Yes, the public victories after the private victories of the first 3 habits. He says, while independence is good, interdependence is even better.
We can achieve more together than alone.
Exactly. But you can't have true interdependence without first being independent. You need that strong internal foundation.
Right. Those first 3 habits are essential.
Exactly. And then there's this idea of the abundance mentality versus the scarcity mentality.
Tell me more about that.
People with a scarcity mentality see the world as a zero-sum game. If someone else wins, they lose. But with an abundance mentality, you believe there's enough for everyone. You celebrate others' success and see opportunities for collaboration.
That sounds way more positive.
It is. And it sets the stage for the habits of interdependence, which we'll dive into next.
This is great, Joanna. I'm starting to see how these habits build on each other.
They really do. It's a framework for a more fulfilling and effective life.
Can't wait to hear more about those public victories and how they play out in real life.
Me too. They offer some really practical strategies for building strong relationships.
Well, let's dive back in then. What's the first of those public victory habits?
Habit 4. Think win-win. It's about moving away from that I win, you lose mentality and seeking solutions where everyone benefits.
Collaboration over competition.
Exactly. And it's totally possible. He gives some great examples. One that stuck with me was the story about that hotel that empowered its employees to write their own mission statements.
Everyone had a voice, basically.
Yeah, and it created this incredible sense of ownership and shared purpose. Everyone, from the housekeepers to the managers, felt like they were part of something bigger.
I bet that had a huge impact on their work.
It did. Employees were more engaged, customer service was amazing, and the business thrived. It wasn't just a feel-good thing. It was a strategic move that created a win-win for everyone.
So much better than a top-down approach where everyone feels like a cog in a machine.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the value of every individual and creating a system where everyone can contribute.
Which seems to tie in nicely with the next habit: seek first to understand, then to be understood. You need that understanding to create win-win solutions, right?
Absolutely. Covey talks about how most of us listen with the intent to reply, not to really understand. We're so focused on getting our point across, we miss what the other person is saying.
Guilty as charged. I do that all the time.
It's so common, but we can learn to listen with empathy, to really put ourselves in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
He even tells this funny story about his own struggles with this, involving a home movie and his wife.
Oh yeah, the take it, don't take it incident. Classic Covey.
He was so focused on getting the perfect shot that he completely ignored his wife's perspective. He ended up creating this stressful, frustrating experience, totally missing the point.
And ruining the whole movie.
Exactly. A great example of how our own anxieties and agendas can get in the way of effective communication. He learned a big lesson that day about letting go and trusting others.
It's a reminder to consider the other person's feelings, not just our own goals.
And Covey offers practical techniques for cultivating empathic listening, like rephrasing content and reflecting feelings. It shows you're really trying to understand.
I remember the story about the father trying to connect with his son who hated school. When the son said, "School is for the birds," the dad just acknowledged his feelings instead of lecturing him. It totally changed the dynamic.
Such a powerful example. Sometimes the best thing we can do is simply listen with empathy and create a safe space for the other person to express themselves.
Okay, so we've got be proactive, begin with the end in mind, prioritize your time, think win-win, and seek first to understand. What's the sixth habit?
Habit 6, synergize. It's about the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
It's more than that. It's about creating an environment where people can come together and achieve something truly extraordinary, something they couldn't do alone.
Sounds almost magical.
It can be. Covey tells this story about a class he taught where the students were initially resistant, but then they started to really engage with each other, share ideas, challenge assumptions, and out of that creative tension, something amazing emerged.
Didn't they end up co-creating a whole new curriculum for the class?
Exactly, something far beyond what Covey could have imagined on his own. And it created this deep bond between them. A true example of the transformative power of synergy.
But that synergy doesn't just happen by accident, right?
Right. It requires trust, a willingness to value differences, and a commitment to finding what Covey calls the third alternative, a solution that's better than any individual proposal.
I like that. So what are some examples of synergy in action?
Well, there's a story about the bank that was about to foreclose on a land developer. It seemed like a lose-lose situation. But Covey facilitated a process where both sides felt heard and understood, and they actually ended up creating a plan that saved the project and strengthened their relationship.
Win-win.
Exactly. A great example of how synergy is possible even in the most challenging situations. So, we've covered the first 6 habits, from being proactive to synergizing with others. It's amazing how they all connect and build on each other. It really is. Covey's work is so insightful. It provides a framework for personal and interpersonal growth.
Before we move on, I'm curious, what's resonated most with you as we've revisited these habits?
Honestly, it's the interconnectedness of them. They work together as a system, a chain reaction of positive change.
Like each habit strengthens the others.
Precisely. That's what makes Covey's framework so powerful. It's not just a bunch of random tips, it's a whole system for personal transformation.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into the first 6 habits, but there's one more we haven't discussed. Sharpen the saw. We'll get into that crucial habit and wrap things up after a quick message from our sponsors.
Welcome back. Ready to dive into habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Definitely. You mentioned it's about self-renewal. Why is that so crucial?
Well, imagine trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw. It's going to be tough, right? You need to keep your tools sharp.
So we're the tools in this analogy.
Exactly. We need to take care of ourselves, sharpen our metaphorical saw so we can function at our best.
Makes sense. What aspects of ourselves are we sharpening?
Covey talks about 4 dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional. We need to nurture all of them.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with the physical, how do we sharpen that saw?
The obvious one is exercise. Find something you enjoy, something sustainable.
No need to force yourself to run marathons if you hate running right now.
Exactly. Find what works for you. And it's not just exercise. It's also about eating healthy, getting enough sleep, managing stress.
Things we often neglect when we're busy, but they're so important.
Absolutely. We can't pour from an empty cup. Now, the spiritual dimension is a bit more personal. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, it's about connecting to something bigger than myself, finding meaning and purpose, whether it's through religion, meditation, spending time in nature, or whatever resonates with you.
Beautifully put. Covey emphasizes aligning with your values, finding inner peace. He suggests practices like meditation, reflection, reading inspiring things. It's about that deep inner work.
Okay, what about the mental dimension? How do we keep our minds sharp?
Covey was all about continuous learning, reading, taking courses, having thought-provoking conversations, exploring new subjects.
So not just passively consuming information, but really engaging with it.
Exactly. And also fostering your creativity, finding ways to express yourself, whether it's through writing, art, music, whatever.
I like that. Sharpen the saw is more than just self-care. It's about continuous growth.
Exactly. And finally, there's the social emotional dimension. This is about nurturing your relationships.
Spending time with loved ones, building connections with colleagues.
Yes, and also developing your emotional intelligence, that ability to understand your own emotions and empathize with others.
Which brings us back to habit 5. Seek first to understand.
It all ties together, and neglecting one dimension impacts the others. If you're physically exhausted, it's harder to be mentally sharp.
Makes sense. You need to find that balance.
Precisely. When all 4 dimensions are working in harmony, that's when we truly thrive.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the 7 habits, Joanna. We've covered so much.
Covey's work is truly timeless. It's as relevant today as it was when it was first published.
I couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
For me, it's this. The 7 habits are not about perfection. They're about progress. It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. It's about constantly striving to improve, not about being perfect.
Exactly. And it's a journey worth taking. When you commit to these principles, you not only improve your own life, but you also make a positive impact on the world around you.
Beautifully said, Joanna. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We hope you found this exploration as enriching as we have. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep sharpening those saws. We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits. Joanna, before the break, we were talking about sharpen the saw, that final habit.
Yeah, the one that kind of fuels all the others, you know?
Yeah.
It's about taking care of ourselves so we can actually live out those other habits.
Right, because if you're burned out and exhausted, it's hard to be proactive or think win-win.
Exactly. We were talking about those 4 dimensions of self-renewal. Physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional. And we covered the physical and spiritual pretty well. But I'm curious to hear more about the mental side of things.
Yeah, me too. How do we keep our minds sharp? Give me
Yeah.
some specifics.
Well, Covey was a huge advocate for continuous learning. Always be reading, taking courses, having those thought-provoking conversations, the kind that really get you thinking.
So it's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it.
Exactly. And he was also a big believer in fostering creativity. Finding ways to express yourself, whether it's through writing, art, music, whatever lights you up.
That's interesting. It makes sharpen the saw seem much more than just self-care. It's almost like self-development.
Right. It's about pushing yourself, expanding your horizons, becoming a more well-rounded person. And it all ties back to the other habits.
Okay, and then the last dimension is social emotional. This is about those connections with other people, right?
Yeah, nurturing those relationships with your family, friends, colleagues, even your community. It's about being present in your interactions and, really practicing empathy.
It sounds simple, but it's so easy to get caught up in our own lives and forget to nurture those relationships.
Totally. And this dimension also involves developing your emotional intelligence, being able to understand and manage your own emotions as well as those of the people around you.
Right, which is so crucial for effective communication and healthy relationships, and just navigating life in general.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that all four dimensions of Sharpen the Saw are kind of interconnected. You can't really neglect one without it impacting the others.
Like if you're physically exhausted, it's going to be harder to be mentally sharp or emotionally available.
Precisely. You got to find that balance. When all four dimensions are in harmony, that's when you really thrive.
This has been such a fascinating journey through the 7 habits, Joanna. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. Covey's work is so insightful. It's like a roadmap for personal and interpersonal growth.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the 7 habits aren't about being perfect. They're about progress. It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to get it all right on the first try.
Right. It's about continuously striving to improve, to become the best version of yourself. And the journey itself is where the growth happens.
Well said, Joanna. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We hope you enjoyed this exploration as much as we did. And remember, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharpening those saws.